Moving iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. Mark and Shawn Hackett. This edition of Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Axon Tire, helping dealers move more iron for the past 100 years. For more information, go to axontire.com. Axon Tire would like to give the loyal listeners of the Moving Iron Podcast a free Alliance camouflage baseball cap. Hunting season out there. You got the blaze orange lettering with the camouflage background. I'll tell you right now, I don't know what more you'd want than something like that. Get yourself one of those. Shawn wears it when he goes alligator hunting down in Florida. So keeps the alligator can't see him that way because he's got camouflage on his head. So he blends right in with the surroundings. So he uses that all the time when he's down there hunting gators. So if you want that, send an email to marketing@axontire.com and you'll get all the great, glorious, awesome nature of that hat sent right to your doorstep. So send an email to marketing@axontire.com. and they will get that over to you ASAP. Also, if you're interested in coming to the Moving Iron Summit coming up here in Nashville, Tennessee, September 11th through the 13th of 2023. Hard to believe that we're already talking about that, but it'll be here before you know it. If you're interested in doing that, send me an email at MovingIronPodcast@MovingIronPodcast.com and be one of the first 150 people to do that, and you will get a $50 discount on your registration fee from the great folks over at Axon Tire. So send me an email at send me an email at MovingIronPodcast@MovingIronPodcast.com and I will get that discount for you. If you want that free baseball cap, send a email to marketing@axontire.com. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 for all your trucking needs at Valley Transportation. Our goal is to help you reach yours. No matter how you buy your ag equipment, whether it's from a dealer, an auction, or a private party, AgDirect can help you finance it. You can even apply online at agdirect.com. Learn more about your financing options at agdirect.com. Tractor Zoom has access to over $20 billion in heavy equipment sales. Tractor Zoom's Iron Comps is the industry's trusted solution for transparent equipment values and auctionable pricing insights. This podcast is brought to you by Anvil AppWorks. Their Dealer Connect CRMI app with integrated inventory management is an affordable Salesforce-based solution for your dealership. Correct. Connect customer experience and transform how you work today. Shawn is with Hackett Financial out of Boca Raton, Florida, and Shawn is nice enough to come and talk about what's going on in the world of the markets and all the stuff that influence that. So, Shawn, how you doing this morning, man?
Doing pretty good. We're getting a lot of noise in markets. It was a big negative down day for most commodities yesterday. I noticed that. Just a lot of noise out there. Between the off again, on again, off again, on again, off again, on again, reopening of China to the next Fed meeting. Are they finally done? Are they not done? Are they done? Are they not done? And it just seems to continue to keep causing bipolar market sentiment on even a day-to-day basis here. So it's kind of tough environment right now for any kind of trends at this point. So we'll have to see how this plays out. And of course, as the further on you get closer to Christmas and the volume continues to dry up and the liquidity dries up, can get even more dicey. So we'll just have to see. So
I noticed that yesterday when I was driving around and getting my little commodity market updates. Was not a banner day for the most commodities out there on the
the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index, which it's kind of the bellwether index that now most people follow and we follow, and we came right to we retested the lows from about a month ago when we had that initial thump. We had that bounce, and now we're retesting. So this is a really, really important spot. If you're looking at a chart, this is either a double bottom that you either make a retest, or it's a little bit of a lower low or higher, and then it rebounds, and then you begin to break back up to the upside, or you break down and you start another leg to the downside. And we're literally right at it. So this is a pretty important week for the market to make its decision. Yeah. Is this just the typical, make a low, bounce, make a secondary low, and then rally, or is there something bigger going on here with China reopening not happening, or I don't know. It's just something to pay attention to when you get to these spots on charts, especially a broad index like that. it's a pretty important week to hold and get some rallies going here. We are bouncing a little bit today, but we'll have to see when the day trade opens up what really happens.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things pulling people in a million different directions. So yeah, it's pretty nuts out there right now. All right, Shawn, you brought up by 2 or 3 weeks ago about an underwater volcano that was going off. That was warming water in an area off of Australia that needed to start cooling in order to get the El Nino train to roll in there, and wanted to follow up with you and see if you had any more updates on that.
It has calmed down. It's not easy to measure these underwater volcanoes. They do their best, but from the best that the smartest people that spend their time looking at underwater volcanoes, they believe that it's calming down and that warm effluent is essentially ceasing. And that so it would appear, unless that returns, and sometimes they do return. Okay, so you get a flurry, it comes down, then you get another flurry. Mm-hmm. But for now, if it comes down, there would be time for those waters to cool down some and maybe reduce at least impact from that particular event. So right now it is calming down, and so we'll just have to see if that's it or there's a return. But for now, it does look like we're not going to get the extended nature, at least of the initial eruption down there, that would create a perpetual warming of that particular region that would have certainly given the El Nino a run for its money. So,
yeah, absolutely. All right. So the volcanic activity that we've been talking about on this show for as long as I've had you on here, you talked about that quite a bit. Dr. Valentina Zarkova talked about it when we had her on here to talk about what was going on with grand solar minimums and those kind of things. And you mentioned several times that during grand solar minimums, there is a spike in volcanic activity. And typically that spike is the big volcanoes that go off. So put this in perspective. Mount St. Helens. Okay. Mount St. Helens what is it? VIC or something? What's that? How is it?
Volcanic Explosivity Index, VEI.
VEI. All right, the VEI index, VEI 4. Okay, so
and it goes from 1 to 8. 8 means we all die. So just kidding. But 8's like crazy. I mean, I think there's only been extinct. Yeah. I mean, yes, the dinosaurs are gone, we're gone, but it's kind of like the Richter scale. Every number up is an exponential, diametrically more massive explosion in terms of effluent and power and in effect it's dramatic. So like 4 to 5 is just dramatically stronger. 4 to, so each one of these, so typically the really big ones are your VEI 5s and higher, and then the really impactful ones are your VEI 6s and higher. Tonga was a VEI 6. Mount St. Helens, as just to relate, that was a VEI 4, very significant volcano, by the way, but just puts in perspective how large these 5 and 6s and 7s can be. Mount Tambora, that went off during the last grand solar cycle, then called the Dalton minimum, was a VEI 7. Another order of magnitude above what we just saw with Tonga in terms of size, quantity of effluent aerosols in the stratosphere. So, that's the cycle. And the reason that this is important is because, and by the way, even if you get 4s and 3s and 5, it doesn't mean that they don't have an impact. It just means that they, in of themselves, the individual eruptions that in themselves don't necessarily impact global climate as a one event. Cumulatively, though, if you have 2 or 3 4s that go off in a year, cumulatively they will. You follow? It's like so what we try to do is that what scientists try to do is to try to measure sulfur dioxide in the stratosphere, total concentrations, because even though a Tambora puts it all in there all one shot, you could have multiple 3s and 4s that over a period of time could put just as much sulfur dioxide over a period of time. So we were able to find good data from scientists that went back, I think it was to 1300 to the now and looked at periods where sulfur dioxide in the stratosphere reached much higher concentrations than normal. And they were all correlated with these periods of quiet solar sunspots, grand solar cycle minimums. In fact, I can show a chart if you want me to do that.
Yeah, let's see a graphic.
It's a pretty cool chart. We show it in our presentations that we've been doing here lately. You see it?
Yes, sir.
So this is a chart of global stratospheric volcanic sulfate aerosols injections. And I've put titles of all the names of the grand solar cycle minimums that have preceded our current one, which we haven't named yet, by the way. But and you can see that all these spikes in sulfur dioxide concentrations all occurred exactly during these extended periods of lower sunspot activity. And it's essentially the increased concentrations of galactic cosmic rays that bombard the Earth's surface mess up. Really, what it does is it messes up the magnetic field of the mantle of the Earth. And when you do that and you distort the magnetic field, it starts to make the seismic activity of the Earth wake up. And that includes increased earthquakes, by the way. So earthquakes and volcanic eruptions go up during these times of increased cosmic rays because the sun is not able to block those cosmic rays from coming in to the same degree they do when it's a normal firing up sun. So that I think this is a very clear chart of the correlation between sulfur dioxide concentrations and grand solar cycle minimums. And the impact of this is to cool the Earth. So, when you have sulfur dioxide in the stratosphere, it blocks the sun, pushes it back.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, we have less sun hitting the Earth to begin with.
Right.
And so that and sulfur dioxide does not trap heat, meaning it's not a greenhouse gas. It allows heat to leave. So you have sun being blocked, you have less sun hitting the Earth to begin with, and the heat's allowed to leave. It causes a significant repeatable cooling effect. So the more sulfur dioxide you get in the stratosphere, the more you're going to cool the Earth just from that particular metric alone, not to mention the other factors we talk about where you get the contraction of the Earth's atmosphere because of the cooling of the atmosphere, because of less sun hitting the atmosphere, creating that meridional jet stream we talk about that leads to destabilization of both the polar vortex in the Arctic and the polar vortex in the Antarctic, leading to these sudden stratospheric warming events that we talked about last year that took place, that can drive this very, very cold air on a more consistent basis into the lower latitudes during the wintertime. It's all these things are kind of connected. And then they also link up with the sea surface temperatures of the Pacific and of the Atlantic, which follow their own cycles. Remember, cold sea surface temperatures mean cold air, vice versa. We already have a cold Pacific. The cold Atlantic is scheduled to arrive by 2025 based on the 60-year cycle, meaning the last time that we saw the Atlantic Ocean go from warm to cold was 1965. That, by the way, was the last time that we had the great salinity event where the Beaufort Gyre of Greenland dumped all that fresh cold water in. And it's interesting, we're starting to see this bulge of cold water starting to show up in the North Atlantic out of nowhere. And there's, it's going to take the scientists a little bit of time to determine if we're getting the change in rotation, but some speculation in some of the papers some of the comments I've read from these oceanographers, there are speculating that we might be in the early phases of that turn, which kind of fits that we should start to see this take place. So anyway, a lot of these moving pieces, Casey, are something we've talked about years ago that we would start to see kind of align up as this quieting sun continues forward. And we're beginning to see more and more of these correlations verifying. And so to me, it's business as usual if one has a history of a framework for looking at how these things tend to evolve. We're starting to see all these pieces coming into play.
Yeah, and we just saw another big volcanic eruption yesterday in Indonesia.
It's not necessarily done yet. It was with a first initial. I don't know if I forget what the name of it was. It was in Java, Indonesia. It's the highest altitude volcano in the world, and it from what they can determine, it was a 15-kilometer boom. That's more like that would be considered. It's too early to tell, but that would be something like maybe a VEI 4, borderline 5. We'll need more time to develop the data to see exactly how far it went up. And by the way, it may not be done. One day it could blow off again, and maybe it goes higher the next time. We just know it went off yesterday, and it's causing all kinds of problems with people having to evacuate and ash going all over, all that kind of thing. But it's still a significant, even if it's just a VEI 4, that's still a significant eruption. But we're getting more of these, Casey. We're getting more of these. They're happening on a more regular basis, and that activity level is consistent with the chart I just showed. That over time, even if you get 3 or 4 3s or 4s, they cumulatively will continue to add that sulfur dioxide in the stratosphere, further enhancing that cooling effect. And why NASA, went back, and when they looked at the last 2 grand solar cycle minimums, they showed significant cooling overall from normalcy, pretty much, everywhere in the world. So it's just something that is beginning to show up more frequently now, and it's going to have a much greater impact on weather. Because remember, once these aerosols get in the stratosphere, when they're put in the stratosphere, they stay there for 3 to 4 years before gravity eventually takes hold and pulls them back down and dissipates out of the stratosphere. So, it's not like they're in there and they're gone 6 months from now. They're in there and they're there and they're doing their magic for the next 2 to 3 or 4 years. And so, definitely something to pay attention to.
I would say so. All right. So as you look through, let's talk about just inflation a little bit and how you see that affecting exports moving forward. I think that's been something I've been looking at and paying attention to. And then as you look at inflation, as you look at strength of the dollar and everything like that, as we move into this January, February, March timeframe for some key exporting of U.S. crops around the world, taking a look at that, Shawn, what are some of your thoughts there, and what impact do you see that having on our export business moving forward?
Well, I mean, if Brazil continues to have very good weather, and we believe they will, the first impact would be the big soybean crop that starts to be harvested in February, and it could be something like 160 million metric tons, something that we've never seen before, quite frankly, a historic crop. And if they start exporting that crop in large quantities, I mean, we are going to take a hit on exports unless we remain competitive. So, that would not be good for at least the short run for U.S. exports, because, Brazil has a history. If they have it, they sell it. They're not like Argentina. The Argentina has a habit of holding on to their supplies because of inflation. Brazil tends to get it and sell it, So that would, and then of course, if their second crop corn that's harvested in late spring is equally as big in terms of size, and we're in that 120 or 125 millimetric ton area, then once again, it's going to be very, very difficult to compete with the Brazilians unless the dollar really, really starts to turn significantly weaker. We do think 2023 is the year that the U.S. dollar bull market move higher reverses lower. Not sure it's going to be that impactful in the first half. We're more excited about the second half of the year for a lower U.S. dollar. If El Nino arrives, Casey, and we're looking at an early spring this year, which is our forecast, an early start to the planting season, if we have decent moisture, we're going to be setting up for record crops. So all this is saying to me, that the export outlook is going to be pretty challenging outside of maybe the next few months. And that's why we really need to book some exports here, Casey, before we see that first wave of increased supply coming from Brazil. We really need to move some product between now and January to kind of provide some room for when this bigger supply comes online. So I would say, in my view, I think the USDA's export expectations that they have in their balance sheets right now are too high. In fact, exports are running well below what they're expecting, and I think they're going to have to lower them, which means they're going to have to increase ending stocks, in order to correct that. Now, the flip side of this, Casey, is all these bean crushing plants are starting to come online in 23, and they're all, gearing up to buy soybeans and crush it into bean oil so that they can make more of this renewable diesel that the Inflation Reduction Act pumped all kinds of money into to support. Now, we had the mandates that came out from the government late last week. The market didn't like it, Casey. They came in with mandates that were much lower than the market was expecting. So there seems to be a disconnect between all these plants that are coming online, expecting, all this renewable diesel to be made, and the mandates that the government came out with. There seems to be a disconnect, and the market sold off hard late last week on it. So I don't know what to make of that, other than to say that these plants that are coming online, and I would think that later on in the year, maybe not the first part of the year, but let's say summer onward, domestic demand for soybeans is probably going to be extremely strong, because there's going to be these plants and they're going to be buying beans, they're going to be crushing oil. So I think the rough patch for demand is that first half where those exports fall short. We can't get competitive with Brazil. We can't get competitive. And the market factors in potential for record crops for us. There could be a demand problem there that we're worried about. At the same time, we know that the world has liquidated a lot of animals in the last couple of years. So unless stockpiling of feed beyond needs occurs, like China, for example, if we're just buying feed for the needs that we have, feed demand is not going to be strong in the first half of the year. So those are the things to consider as we get to the end of the year and we start penciling out expectations for 23.
Right on, man. Well, good stuff as usual, Shawn. Folks want to reach out to you and get more information about what it is you're doing at Hackett Financial. What's the best way to do that?
Our website is Hackett, Hackett, advisors.com. All kinds of various information on there about what we do and how we do it, to see if the kind of information we put out there could be of value to your listeners.
Right on. Appreciate you being on the podcast, man.
Thanks, Casey. Always a blast.
Right on. I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Moving Iron LLC. Also check me out on LinkedIn at Moving Iron Podcast, and go to the video version of this on the Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel, which is the Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel. So check that out there. Everything Moving Iron related you can find at MovingIronLLC.com. The latest blog posts, as well as information about the Moving Iron Summit coming up here in Nashville, Tennessee, September 11th through the 13th. Booked a great speaker here, so you check that out. I'll have that information up here directly. A little behind on posting blogs, but I'll have a few blog posts coming up here this week that'll get posted as well. So with that, I am Casey Seymour with Shawn Hackett. Let's move smart, folks. Out.
Moving iron in the 21st century.